Hello. So, I've been talking up these group scripts for a while, and they're finally usable. I guess they're ready for release. There are a couple of little details with them that I'm not the biggest fan of, but I mean, it's good enough that I could believe that they can be used now. So, I guess the first thing to do would be to go over the general concept of them. Um, Unity has the ability to attach scripts onto objects so that you can just modify the object and add new abilities, new properties to it. And Unreal's version of that is to put components, actor components, whatever, onto an object. But you don't really want to put a component onto a component, and components can't contain components within themselves. You have to do it within the actor context. And a lot of the utility of this VR plugin for gripping is being able to, like take this gun for instance, having grippable components on top of the gun. So like this slider up here, grippable by itself. To modify how it grips, I don't want to add another component below it in this. I don't want to hand code all the custom logic for it. So what I came up with was grip scripts. And what grip scripts are there modular scripts that modify how the transform is calculated for a grip. So I guess the easiest way to do this, well, here, since this is a new thing, I transitioned all of the default logic over to a grip script actually. So I've got this gun here in the level. It's got grip logic scripts empty. There's no special scripts on it right now. So if I go into the level and I go up to the gun and I grip it, it behaves just like it normally does. It's a physical grip, normal world transform. Now if I take the same gun and I add the default grip script onto it, this is what the motion controller uses by default. If you don't override anything, it automatically uses this grip script. It's a native grip script, so the performance is essentially the same as hard-coding and everything like it was before. No differences, gun behaves the same logic. However, if I take the grip script default and I replace it with interactable settings, which is bringing back those things I removed in 420 for people that still want to use them, and let's say I lock the x-axis. Now when I go in, I can't move the gun on the x-axis anymore. It's locked in position. And that's because I overrode the default logic for how to move the object by adding a grip script to it. So the gun no longer goes through that default grip script. The controller doesn't follow its default pathway. It uses what the gun has specifically on it. That can be extended to nesting. Not nesting, but let's say a workflow of grip scripts. So let's say I would make a lightweight default grip script. It doesn't do any of the secondary hand stuff. It doesn't do any of the smoothing. It's just the fastest possible thing. It just returns where it should be relative to the controller. And then beyond that, I add a lerp to hand script. So now I have the basic movement, and then I also have it so that it lerps to the hand when you first grip it, pick it up until it's within a certain radius, and then it's locked to the hand. So I've now combined two grip scripts. I have a base grip script that's the default hard transform, and then one that modifies the transform and lerps to the hand. So you can nest them in order, and it goes in order 0 through to whatever. Let's set the interrupt speed to this to like 20, so it's faster. It's using a standard quaternion interrupt, so it matches up some more smoothly, more quickly hits equilibrium with where it's supposed to be. The lerp to hand grip script turns itself off. It becomes inactive after it's hit the correct location, so it's no longer called and doesn't take up performance. And then when you would drop the item and pick it up again, it's activated again. So I drop it, now it's activated. Also, since what it's doing is it's lerping from where it currently is to where it wants to be. If you're gripping someplace that's not a socket, so it's not snapping, you're already directly where you want to be, there's no lerp. I mean, it's already where it wants to be. But if you were to like remotely pick it up and say I want it at my hand, it would, lerp over to you. So the main point of grip scripts is a lot of the logic for how transform was calculated was baked into the motion controllers, And I got tired a while back of adding new features to the motion controllers by hard coding them in. It felt really inflexible and not good enough. So this lets mostly C++ coders, because that's where this shines, but you can do it in Blueprint too. People override all the default logic for that world calculation, the world transform calculation, and replace it with whatever they want. So let's say one of the ones that's going to ship eventually is GripScript Gun Tools. And my thought for Gun Tools is I can add the shoulder socket for the 3-point secondary like rotation calculations. I can add built-in stuff for recoil and kickback and all that, and I can do it in a grip script. So none of these extra variables have to be in interface settings. You don't have to have any of this extra bloat. You just take something that you want to be a gun, you add the Gun Tools grip script to it, and you configure the variables. And obviously you would have to set, when it's shoulder mounted, and then you'd set the transform in the socket that's following, but then the grip script would do the rest of it. It would calculate where the transform would be, it would handle everything for you. And this will let me pull features out of being hard-coded and put them into modular files that you can add to things, like the interactable settings. I hated interactable settings after the first couple months of the plugin, but until I made all the interactable objects, there wasn't a real replacement for them without people hand-coding a bunch of stuff. So now that all the interactables exist, and I have examples in a tool library for custom grips, I removed interactable settings entirely from the plugin in 420, and then I added back in as a grip script now for when grip scripts release. That way you still have all that functionality, but it's not bloating the default structure. It's not stuck in here all the time. You don't have to look at it. It's not extra memory that's being used. It's an option that's added in. At some point, I might go in and take some of these advanced grip settings that aren't used all that often, and I might throw them into grip scripts instead, like grip influence, dead zone, and distance, and some of the secondary grip stuff. That doesn't have to be on 99% of grips, and it's really kind of for guns only. So I would probably move that out and into the Gun Tools grip script eventually, so that there's less replication overhead on every other grip in the engine, and things are cleaner. Really, if I had enough foresight, and I don't think this was even possible back when I started the plugin, because instance objects were a little iffy and they had some problems. But this is where I would have liked to be to begin with, where it's this modular and you can add stuff and modify, and But we're here now, and I can work on this and print it out and flesh it out, and it should be nice. There are a couple downsides to grip scripts. For one, there's a bit of an overhead calling into the blueprint graph on blueprint ones. I can't avoid that. It's just how blueprints work. And normally you can mitigate that by nativizing, because in 420 I made it so the entire plugin is nativized correctly. I went through, found every reason why it wouldn't, and reported them as bugs to Epic, and they fixed them before 420 released. So normally you could just nativize everything, and that cost is gone. But instanced objects, which I'm using for the grip strips, don't nativize correctly currently. So I guess I have another bug to report. But until then, what I've done is I've made it so that if you're using a native C++ grip script class, it does not call into blueprint graph. It just skips it. It's just like, hey, I don't have any blueprints. I'm going to skip calling into this, and this 11 times more expensive call is not going to happen. So you get near native speed with GripScript default or any of the other C++ built-in ones as you would if I did not have GripScripts at all and it was just the old hard-coded logic. I've profiled it extensively. The speed is essentially the same. It's just a couple more checks and if statements, but in packaged shipping builds, there's no difference. But this makes it more flexible. You say I have SPS Vivepunk character here. Let's say you have a C++ coder, or even blueprints if you're willing to accept the cost, who doesn't like all the default transform logic I have, and they just want a simple or more complex default gripping transform calculation. They can go into the motion controller and set the default grip script class to something other than default. They can set it to gun tools, and then everything you pick up is essentially a gun. Problem with that is without a T array, they won't expose the variables, so you'd have to you'd have to actually pull up the variable for this that's in the code and set the variables yourself. This is more for ones that don't require variables, and it's for advanced usage. So I wouldn't worry too much about the motion controller direct override. Most of your overrides are going to happen in the objects themselves. Now, the cool thing about grip scripts is they're stored as a T array on the grippable, and that T array is replicated. And I went into the U object for these. I implemented all of the replication that the actor components have, but in these objects. So you can make a grip script like this test one that I made. Let me show you before I go into test. Let me turn this into a test grip script. Go in and pick it up. What the test grip script does is it locks the position when it's active. It doesn't let it move. Let me get rid of this block here. But I mean, everything else still functions normally. It just locks the position on it. So you have the test grip script, and it supports replication. So I have rep test here, which is a rep notify, and when replicated, you get the owner for this print so that it has the right world context. These objects don't have any world context of their own. And I can sit down here and I can check has authority, which is a node I added to this U object. And if it's a server, then it sets that variable. If it's not the server, it goes up here and does its world transform calc. And then it replicates this Boolean to the client. So it just works. You can call RPCs from here. If you go into here and you add a custom event, blah blah blah, and you set it to run on server, you can call FDGHF from the client to run on the server and send an RPC to it. It taps into the actor's replication channel and sends RPs through the actor that owns this on the very outer. So if this is a grippable component, it'll go up the chain of owners until it hits the actor, and then it'll replicate its RPC through the actor. Same for the variables. It goes up the chain of owners until it hits the actor, and then it replicates its variable through the graph. So you can store things on here that you want to be replicated down, or you can send RPCs up to the server and just acts as a mini blueprint graph specifically for altering, editing, or tracking grips. To facilitate this, I added a bunch of default nodes. This will expand in the futures. I think of more that can be needed, but these are the basics that made the most sense. As far as events, I added an onBeginPlay. This one's not automatic because UObjects don't have a begin play event, so I had to make one. I call this from all the grippables on their group begin play so that the grip scripts can get this. It's useful if you wanted to say make a grip script for a lever or an interactable or something like that you can just tack on and turn it into that. You kind of need a begin play then to get the initial transform. You might need a begin play to get some property or stat. It's just a utility, and it doesn't cost much to have because it's only called once. So I mean, there's no harm in having an event for it. I tap into the event on grip release, secondary grip, and secondary grip release. This is when the owner of this grip script is gripped. Then the owner calls in and says, hey, this is what happened to me. So you can track things. For instance, the alert to hand when it's gripped will turn on the activity. It'll make itself active. You can go into your class defaults. Is active means that the grip script will be ran. So it makes itself active on grip and it deactivates itself on grip release. That one also deactivates itself when it's done lerping, so you can do stuff with that. Grip scripts have this activity, and then it has world transform override type. Modifies world transform means that the script is expected just to take the world transform that was calculated before it in the array and modify it in some manner and then pass it on. Overrides means that it's expected to completely override the world transform, make it something brand new, and ignore everything that came before it. I mean, there could be cases where you want this halfway down chain anyways, if they're going to, something before it's going to store values and then use them later, I don't know. I mean, you can do whatever with it. And none means it doesn't not alter the world transform, does nothing with it. Essentially all it does is it takes these events and it does something, I don't know what. Utility nodes, I have has authority. it checks up the owning chain until it hits the actor and checks if it has network authority, if you're the server or not. That's kind of necessary for all these RPCs and stuff like that, so I had to add it. Objects don't have that kind of thing. Get parent transform checks up the chain until it hits a primitive. Well, it checks owner. If the owner is a primitive, then it gets the primitive transform. If it's an actor, it gets the actor transform. You can convert it between world transform or relative transform. Get parent gets the parent if it's a component or actor. Get owner gets the actor all the way up the chain, or just the direct parent if it has an actor. In the guns case, this is a grippable actor, so the direct parent would be the owner. And then get grip transform, just so you don't have to calculate yourself. It takes the grip and the parent transform from get world transform and converts it into the normal expected transform. Includes the addition transform that's in the back end. If you go to the grip here, you break it. Addition transform here. That's what we use for recoil and stuff like that, and special movements. It calculates that into. So this test grip script, like I said before, is it still on? Did I remove it? That's still on. Okay. It modifies the world transform and makes it not move anymore. It doesn't do anything. I do that by overriding the function get world transform for the grip script. And if lock position is on, then I just set it to the current transform of the parent, so it doesn't move at all. And if lock position is not on, then I get the expected grip transform, and I set it to that. Now, what's this set to? This is set to modifies, so this is technically not even correct. Since it's modifying a base transform, I can get rid of this entire second branch here and just return true, because when its position's locked, then I'm nulling the position out. When it's not locked, then I'm just letting the base position calculation go through. So it should work like normal. So we'll set lock position to off by default, and now it works like normal. Yeah. If this was overrides world transform, it would expect this bottom part to be filled in too, but it's not necessary for this script. That's the basic of grip scripts. It's a decently large overhaul. It took a lot of additional code to add, but it's very extendable, and I can think of many things that you can do with it. And even if you don't do anything with it, the point that it doesn't really affect performance, and that it lets me add in a method for people to directly modify these calculations without going in and changing plugin code directly. That's just something I really wanted to achieve. So I've been working at this for a while. And it took a while to get stable because not that many people use instanced objects for things. Not that many people replicate U objects. I mean, there are people doing it. It's just not that common. So this is one of the areas of the engine where things aren't tested as much as you'd like. But I hope you get the point of these and why I really wanted to do them. They're going to be releasing next week. I could probably release them this weekend, but I got to do some more testing and multiplayer with them. I mean, so far they seem stable. There's some small little annoyances. Like I said, nativization does not work with them, so I have to report that. If you change the base class grip script, since these are instants, there are new U objects on every object. If I go into gun base here and I set this to lerp to hand as its grip script, it's not going to change the one in the level, because the one in the level is set to test. It's an override, and it's a little buggy with resetting to default. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's not the biggest deal. Normally you'll be doing it in the base class and spawning it, or on the level overriding it anyways. So you just have to watch out for that, that's all. I guess the next thing I'm going to be tackling after grip scripts are all done, I have to write the gun tools grip script. That one isn't complete, so that's going to take up a lot of time. But I also got 2 developer kits for Knuckles controllers from Valve, which I greatly appreciate, and I have a lot of plans for. Like, a lot of them. I've dreamt up some interesting things. I've been sick and working on this. I really needed to push this feature out, so I let it idle for a little while, but I can't wait to get back to them because they're really, really interesting hardware. But anyways, 4.21 probably isn't that far out now. I've seen a lot of commits related to it, a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting VR things in the GitHub for Epic. So I guess I'm just gonna finish this up, release it, and I'll make more videos soon about other stuff. See ya.